I was supposed to orchestrate a perfect wedding, beautiful, seamless, controlled. Weddings are illusions, and I am a master at maintaining them. But nothing could have prepared me for Adrian Vale. The man everyone adored, feared, and whispered about, standing at the altar in a suit that defined power itself, and yet looking at me like I had always belonged to him. He was marrying another woman, a bride polished for the cameras, but his eyes betrayed the truth: he didn't want her. He wanted me. One slow, deliberate kiss at the altar shattered everything: vows, expectations, and my careful professional detachment. Suddenly, I wasn't the planner. I was the storm. And some men don't just take hearts, they claim them, and leave the world to burn around us. Part 1. I told myself the first time I saw Adrian Vale that it was just business. The kind of business where chaos had to be disguised as perfection, where the smallest crack in the veneer of luxury could cost millions or reputations. I had been hired to make a wedding flawless, and I would succeed because that's what I do. I'm good at what I do. I organize, I control, I anticipate disasters before anyone else even sees them coming. I do not get involved. I do not fall in love with my clients. And yet, when I walked into the grand ballroom of Vale Estate for the first time, I realized that rules are fragile when he is in the room. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted by the dying sun spilling gold across the marble. One hand in his pocket, the other casually resting on the windowsill. He didn't turn when I entered, he didn't even acknowledge me at first. But then he spoke. My name. Pronounced like a secret he had been keeping, and for an instant, I felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with my job. My throat went dry. My pulse stuttered. And yet, I reminded myself, this is Adrian Vale. Billionaire, enigmatic, dangerously magnetic, and entirely off-limits. I introduced myself, professional, measured, everything rehearsed, but he cut me off, calmly, his voice smooth like polished stone. I know who you are. I've read your reputation. The faintest smile brushed his lips, teasing, unsettling. The storm in his eyes hinted at danger, but the kind of danger you'd lean toward if you were foolish or brave. The wedding was for Celeste Laurent. She was the kind of beauty that could stop a room, but I had learned long ago that beauty is often a mask for fragility, arrogance, or calculation. I watched her glide through the estate, perfectly poised, her smile rehearsed, her eyes polite but distant. And Adrian? He barely looked at her except when required. His gaze found me in moments that shouldn't have mattered: a fleeting glance at rehearsal, a hand brushing against mine while adjusting a table setting, a quiet word whispered when no one else was in the hallway. He asked questions that weren't about the wedding, about my life, my choices, my fears. And I, in turn, realized I was answering more than I should. I told myself I was imagining it. He was married to her in every way that mattered. Any involvement between us was impossible. Professionalism demanded it. But desire is stubborn. It does not negotiate with logic. The night before the wedding, the estate was swallowed by a storm. Rain hammered against the windows, the wind rattled the doors, and the world shrank to shadows and candlelight. I went to the terrace for air, to gather myself, to feel nothing but the cold. And he appeared behind me, silent as a predator, his coat damp, hair pressed to his forehead, eyes reflecting lightning. "You're going to regret being in my world," he said, almost a warning. I didn't answer. I knew he wasn't threatening me, he was tempting me. "I don't want to marry her," he said, low and deliberate, as if stating the truth aloud might make it real. My chest tightened. I should have walked away. I should have told him that he was dangerous, that he was untouchable, that getting close would burn me. But I didn't. I couldn't. The truth is, I wanted him to be real. To want. To choose. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, and I found myself listening to him speak of things no groom should admit: debts, betrayals, compromises made for survival, marriages arranged as currency, the loneliness behind the empire. I should have heard a stranger's story, yet every word resonated like a confession written for me. And when he finally stepped close enough for the warmth of his body to touch mine, I realized that restraint is a lie when someone wants you enough to break everything for it. Morning came with violent clarity. The world outside was washed clean by the storm. Celeste moved through her hair and makeup with the calm certainty of someone born to perfection, unaware that the stage she had been trained for was collapsing. I orchestrated the day like a surgeon, precise and detached, but my pulse betrayed me whenever Adrian's eyes found mine. He lingered in glances, touches, moments that were small but devastating. When the music swelled and the doors opened, I positioned myself at the side, invisible, as the room rose in anticipation. He took her hands. He listened to vows. And then, with a measured inevitability, he turned to me. The world narrowed. His eyes, sharp and unrelenting, held mine across the room. He walked toward me. Every step was deliberate. Every heartbeat echoed louder in my ears. And then his lips met mine. Not hurried, not apologetic, not chaotic, precise, claiming, devastating. Gasps erupted. Celeste cried out. Cameras flashed. But I was numb, yet alive in ways I had never known. I felt seen, chosen, recognized in a way that erased the boundaries of my life. We were pulled apart, the world roaring back in with disbelief and horror. He whispered my name, promising a truth I could barely comprehend. Later, behind closed doors, he revealed the lies behind the marriage, the empire built on debts and manipulations, the freedom he was willing to pay for me. I should have walked. I should have refused. Instead, I listened. And I realized the lines we drew for ourselves are only as strong as the fear that enforces them. 3 months passed. I disappeared from every contact, every city, every wedding. I told myself I was protecting myself, that I would not be a casualty in a game he had started. And yet, in quiet moments, I thought of him, his hands, the weight of him, the way he had made me feel unflinchingly alive. Then a letter arrived. Not an apology. A confession. A reckoning. A hand extended across time and space, and suddenly the world was not mine to navigate alone. Part 2. When Adrian found me again, there was no fanfare. No cameras, no whispers, no invitations. Only him, impossibly calm, impossibly present, and the tension that had haunted me for months settling like smoke in my chest. I should have run. I should have hidden behind every wall I'd built, every contract I'd signed, every carefully rehearsed excuse. But I didn't. The moment our eyes met, the world contracted, and everything I had told myself about caution, about restraint, fell away like ash in wind. He stepped forward, slow, measured, and yet the air between us trembled with a dangerous electricity. You disappeared, he said quietly, almost accusingly. I waited. I swallowed hard, trying to remember how to breathe in the presence of a man who had undone my life and yet made me feel more alive than I had ever been. I needed distance, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. To think. To make sense of this. His tone darkened, eyes narrowing in that way that always made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't escape. You think this is just about the wedding? About what you saw? I wanted to look away. To pretend that the kiss, the scandal, the way he had claimed me at the altar, had been a single, isolated moment. But the truth was lodged in my chest, alive and insistent. It's not just about the wedding, I admitted, my fingers curling into the fabric of my coat. It's about you. About us. About how everything changed in one impossible second. His lips curved into the faintest smile, dangerous and knowing. Good, he said simply. Because I've waited long enough for you to say it. He reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from my face, and the contact made a current surge straight through me. I wanted to step back. I wanted to resist. I couldn't. Adrian's hands were both gentle and commanding, an impossible contradiction. When he pulled me closer, I felt the weight of him pressing into me, grounding me, consuming the space I thought was mine alone. You think you can run from this, he whispered, but some connections aren't meant to be escaped. They're meant to be claimed. I shivered at the intensity in his voice, the certainty in his eyes, and the sheer power of the man I had once believed untouchable. Desire, fear, and fascination collided in a storm I couldn't and didn't want to resist. I closed the distance between us, allowing my body to answer the questions my mind had been pretending it didn't have. When our lips met again, it wasn't tentative. It was deliberate, claiming, and it left no room for doubt that Adrian Vale did not negotiate. He commanded, and I, for the first time in my life, wanted to be commanded. The days that followed were a delicate balance of chaos and secrecy. We existed in stolen moments, brief, scorching bursts of time where the world outside ceased to exist. He was relentless, merciless in his pursuit, and yet beneath the storm was a quiet vulnerability that he shared only with me. I saw it in fleeting glances when he thought no one was watching, in the subtle tension of his jaw when he spoke of obligations he detested, in the rare softness of his touch when the world was gone and only we remained. I hated how easily he broke through my defenses. I hated that I craved it. Every glance, every brush of skin, every whispered word became a tether I couldn't ignore. I told myself this was dangerous. That he was dangerous. But the truth was simple. I was already lost to him. Already ensnared by a man who thrived on power, and who had decided that claiming me was worth risking everything else. Then came the revelation that shattered my carefully constructed reality. Adrian had known my history, my debts, my fears, and had quietly obliterated them long before I realized it. Every obstacle I had faced had been dismantled by him, every invisible chain removed without my knowledge. The realization was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. He had orchestrated not only my safety, but my freedom, and yet he did it for reasons he refused to fully explain. He did not ask for gratitude. He did not seek acknowledgement. He only wanted me, my presence, my attention, my acquiescence. I confronted him one night in the dim light of his study, the room heavy with the scent of cedar and old leather. The truth had to be spoken. "Why?" I demanded, voice trembling despite my attempt at control. "Why me? Why all of this? Why destroy so much for a person you barely know?" He leaned against the desk, eyes piercing, unwavering. "I know more than you think," he said softly. "I've watched, waited, calculated. And I chose you. Not because I could manipulate your life, though I could, but because you're the one I've been searching for. Not a bride, not a contract, not a pawn. You." I swallowed hard, my heart threatening to break under the weight of his words. The simplicity of it stunned me. The man who wielded power like a weapon, who had burned bridges and destroyed alliances without hesitation, had chosen me not for what I could give him, not for convenience, but for myself. And then, as if reading my thoughts, he stepped closer. His hand brushed my cheek, gentle but insistent. "You don't have to decide tonight," he murmured. "But I need you to understand one thing. I am not gentle, I am not patient, and I am not someone who waits indefinitely. You belong with me, or you don't belong at all." I could have laughed at the audacity, at the magnitude of the risk, at the sheer impossible nature of the man in front of me. Instead, I felt a rush of something raw and undeniable, the want to surrender, to trust, to leap into the storm that was Adrian Vale. I nodded, the weight of my consent more powerful than any words. "Then claim me," I whispered. From that moment, our lives became a study in extremes. We navigated the wreckage of scandal, the judgment of society, the whispers of those who would never understand. Adrian was relentless, uncompromising, and intoxicating. Each encounter with him was charged with electricity, passion intertwined with danger, desire laced with power. Every time he touched me, it was a declaration. Every time he held me, it was a claim. Every time he kissed me, it was a surrender of control I had never allowed anyone before. And yet, beneath the tempest of desire, there was intimacy. Moments when the armor fell away and we were not billionaire and wedding planner, not scandal and intrigue, but simply two people, stripped of pretense, connecting in ways that defied logic and reason. He revealed pieces of himself rarely shared, the weight of expectation, the scars of betrayal, the rare moments of vulnerability that made him terrifyingly human. I shared pieces of myself as well, not the polished exterior, but the fears, the doubts, the dreams that had been buried beneath years of careful control. I learned that love with Adrian Vale was not quiet. It was not safe. It was a storm that could consume, destroy, and rebuild. I had no illusions about what it meant to be with him. There would be danger. There would be chaos. There would be moments when the world seemed intent on tearing us apart. But there was also truth, unflinching, undeniable, a bond forged in fire and secrecy, and sealed by choice. Weeks turned into months, and with each day, our connection deepened. We became co-conspirators in our own story, building a life in the shadows, away from the expectations of family, society, and legacy. Adrian taught me the thrill of trust, the power of surrender, the freedom of being wanted without condition. I taught him the resilience of patience, the fragility of the human heart, the strength in vulnerability. Together, we discovered a rhythm, a balance that was chaotic yet perfect in its imperfection. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the sky bled hues of amber and crimson, Adrian took my hand and led me to the terrace. Rain, light and misty, fell against our faces, and for a moment, the world held its breath. "Do you know," he said quietly, "why I've never stopped looking for you? Why I destroyed everything that stood between us?" I shook my head, words caught in the web of anticipation and awe. Because some things are worth claiming, even when the world tries to take them away. Because some hearts are not given, they are seized. And I have seized you. Entirely. Forever. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sorrow, but from the weight of being seen, chosen, and wanted so completely. In that instant, all the chaos, all the danger, all the impossible nature of our connection made sense. We had survived scandal, judgment, fear, and desire. And here we were, two people standing amid the wreckage of a world that had tried to define us, unbroken, unflinching, irrevocably bound. I leaned into him, feeling the strength and warmth of his body, the certainty of his claim, and whispered, "Then I am yours. Completely." He smiled, and it was not arrogance, not control, not temptation, it was a promise. "And I am yours," he replied. "In every way that matters." We kissed then, slow and deliberate, tasting the storm we had survived, the fire we had ignited, and the calm that followed the chaos. It was a kiss that spoke of power, trust, obsession, and surrender. A kiss that marked the end of the past and the beginning of a life we would forge together, unapologetic and unyielding. The world outside could judge. It could whisper. It could try to reclaim what we had defied. But inside the sanctuary of our storm, we were invincible. Adrian Vale had claimed me, and I had chosen him. Not for convenience, not for comfort, but for the raw, unrelenting truth that some loves are worth everything. And we were proof. We walked back inside, hand in hand, facing whatever the world dared to throw at us. Scandal would come. Obstacles would arise. But the bond we shared, forged in fire, desire, and mutual reckoning, could not be undone. Later, as I lay beside him, tracing the planes of his face, I realized something I had known all along but had never allowed myself to admit. With Adrian Vale, there were no illusions, no safety nets, no guarantees. Only intensity, only truth, only choice. And I would choose him again, every single time. I closed my eyes, feeling his heartbeat against mine, the warmth of his skin, the certainty of his presence, and whispered into the quiet night, "Forever, Adrian." He tightened his hold, a satisfied, possessive murmur escaping him. "Forever," he confirmed, and I knew, with unshakable certainty, that some bonds are forged not in gentleness, but in fire, and that we, in all our chaos, had survived it, claimed it, and would endure it together. The storm had passed. We had endured the world's judgment, its expectations, its chaos. And in the aftermath, we were unbroken. We were alive. And we were ours. And that was everything.